Okay, we should be streaming now. Alright. So, just a little buffer before we start the actual podcast here. You doing alright?
Oh yeah, I'm
Okay.
doing great. How about you? I hope you're not perishing from frustration over there.
Yeah. I'm going to just check the stream on my headphone here to make sure it's looking alright.
You can see me okay?
Yeah. Yeah. You got your nice little Oz hat there.
Yep, yep.
So,
It's backwards, but there it is.
let's see. Stream
But then so much of life is backwards these days.
Feels like it. Okay, gonna put myself into a nice little corner here, so. Okay. Alright, there we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started then if you're ready.
All right.
Okay. And let me just do one last check and make sure everything's up and running. Okay. Says all the devices are on. So everyone should be getting my audio and hearing you.
Very good.
I don't. Alright. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Royal Podcast of Oz. It's been a second since I've done a little interview here. But today I'm talking to fellow Oz author and my very good friend Paul Dana.
Hello, everybody.
um, Now, this is our first time doing this live on Twitch. So there might be a little bit of bugs here. But Paul, how did you wind up heading down the Yellow Brick Road the first time?
I'm sorry, say again.
How did you wind up heading down the Yellow Brick Road the first time?
So, I apologize. I'm still not understanding what you said.
How did you wind up finding Oz for yourself?
Finding Oz. So like a lot of people, the MGM movie was my first introduction. But my mom also had in the house two Oz books that had come down to her from her grandmother, which were TikTok of Oz and the Lost King of Oz. So one Baum and one Thompson, and she read those to us. So early on, I realized that Oz was much more than the movie, and then I started collecting the Baum books.
Okay. So, what do you think got you interested in the series?
Well, I loved fantasy from a very early age, and I think when I was a kid, virtually all the books that I wanted to read were fantasy of one kind or another, with the possible exception of Beverly Cleary. I did read a few of those, but almost everything else was fantasy. And Oz is just a great fantasy. So I loved the characters, I loved the magic, and the villains are fun. What's not to love?
Right. Devil Clear was really good. So,
And also, of course, Oz is that welcoming place that any nerdy kid feels that they would feel at home
yeah. There's a, like, whew. So, eventually, I remember that you wrote an Oz story called The Lost Boy of Oz about Button Bright. It was initially published online, and then so how did that come about eventually?
in. Do you mean how did I come to write it, or how did it come to be in print eventually?
Well, how you came to write it, first of all.
So the way that I started writing Oz stories was that I was talking with a non-Oz friend about about Oz and about the subject of Lurleen, and how I had questions about her and about how she transformed Oz into a fairyland and what that meant. And I wished at that time that somebody would write a book about that. And they probably had, and I just didn't know it. But my friend said, well, you should write it. And so I started to do that. And that became my first Oz story, which was Time Travelers in Oz. And in which Button Bright and Ojo go back in time and witness the transformation of Oz into a fairyland. And then the Lost Boy of Oz grew out of that. There were still unanswered questions, in fact, even more unanswered questions. And so it went on from there.
So it snowballed where, let's see, right now you've written, what was it, 4 books altogether that Joe Bongiorno's Royal Publisher of Oz has published.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah, there's The Law of Oz and other stories. It has your early stories.
Right.
The Magic Umbrella of Oz, was that the title?
So the Magic Umbrella of Oz was the second volume, but the first volume, The Law of Oz and Other Stories, is actually kind of an anthology. It contains my first 2 Oz stories, the Time Travelers of Oz and The Lost Boy of Oz, plus another sequel and a short story. And so Magic Umbrella of Oz is officially the second volume, but not the second story, if you follow.
Right. Yeah. So when it came to books published, you had the anthology, which was the first book, and then after that you did novel length sequels, I guess.
Right.
So, and then Yuku's of Oz and Immortal Longings of Oz.
That's right.
So, yeah. I mean, I just double checked on my shelf right behind me, so.
Oh, what a classy shelf.
Yeah.
I've seen photos of your shelf online, and you have a much bigger collection than I do at this point.
Yeah. So, well, I've now got a nice little background to stream with and stuff to read. That's where you were to go, I guess.
That's what we love.
All right. So, what drew you to the character of Button Bright and Ojo to kind of, because basically they seem to be the big recurring characters in your stories.
Right. So when I started writing, or was thinking about Time Travelers of Oz and how I would put it together, I had to create a story that would answer the questions that I had in my head about Lurleen. I knew she would be in it, but I didn't know anything else. So I had to think, well, who's going to be the villain? Who's going to carry the story forward? Who will be the heroes? And I've always liked Button Bright and Ojo, because since I was a little boy, and they were boys, so I guess I identified with them. And they were also, Button Bright, I enjoyed his, not just exactly his getting lostness, but his casual approach to life, his sort of philosophical, low-key way of looking at things. And I thought those would be fun characters to use that I could get into their heads and identify with them. And then finally, just the idea of their friendship, which became a central theme of the stories all the way through. That they are best friends, that they play together, live together, travel together, everything as a unit, and I just loved that.
Okay. And I know that kind of talking about your stories, if someone's not familiar with them, it kind of gets hard to not get into spoilers there, so it's a little difficult. Let's just say that there's very surprising twists and turns in your stories.
Right. A lot of changes happen to Button Bright and Ojo, involving magical powers without getting too specific. And so in this sense, I regard my stories as being sort of a separate canon. Nobody should have to worry about the changes that I've made. They should be able to take these same characters, back to Baum and run with them just as I did. Um, but yes, I take them through a lot of changes, and I had a lot of fun doing that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's important. Where right now there are so many Oz books that I'm just like, yeah, I cannot keep up with them all. So
Yes. And
yeah,
there are more happening every year.
every month, it seems like we get an update of, oh, these Oz books were published this month, and it's like, oh wow, I am probably not going to read that. Not making any judgment on it. It's just that there's just too much to keep up with.
It's true. It just goes on, and that's one of the great things about Oz is that people are able to find their own place in it, and create and work with their own version of it that lives in their heads. I think there's a different Oz that lives in every Oz fan's head that is either that's slightly different or perhaps even radically different from the Oz's that live in other people's heads, and that's one of the wonderful things about it.
Right on. Alright. Now I do know that even though it's not Bomb's Eyes, you do have a soft spot in your heart for the MGM film. So
Certainly, yes.
every man, just about. It's like if you don't love the MGM film, are you a fantasy fan? Because you know there's a few things that people like. There's definitely criticisms you can have, but at the end of the day, it's really such a enjoyable film that it's really hard to be like, wait, how could you hate this?
Right. Although I understand people who resent it for the liberties that it took with Baum, and especially Oz being a dream. But I regard it as being just a completely separate thing, and a wonderful, enjoyable thing. I love the songs, I love the music, I love Margaret Hamilton. I wanted to be the Wicked Witch of the West when I was a little kid. That was a whole different side of it, I guess. And yeah, I guess I had the evil queen side way back then. So yeah, I I I still love it, and I
Okay.
expect I will.
Alright, so when you were growing up, did you have any friends or siblings you shared your love of Oz with, or?
Not to the same degree by any means, but my whole family did love the movie and would sit down and watch it together up to, a certain age. My brother and sister drifted away when they got older, but I think, one of the things about Oz fans who started when they were kids is that they stick with it. And people around them may drift away and get other interests, but we stick with it, and that was what I did. Um, but it remains to this day, I would say, a strong current in my family. My sister and I both quote from the movie, um, and at length, as well as many other things. So, but as far as friends go, I did not know anyone who liked Oz in the way I did. Not really until I started going to the Oz convention
So yeah,
to Wisconsin.
yeah. And alright, so what I remember that what was it? Was it 2013 the first time you went to?
It was the last year of it was the last year in Asilomar.
So
Um,
I think that was
right,
2013. Yeah,
and that was a year that you won the Fiction Award, I
yeah,
remember.
yeah.
Congratulations again.
So that was definitely 2013 because I remember we had those stand-ups from Oz the Great and Powerful that year. So,
Hmm.
um, so you hadn't got, and then the past several years you've been serving as registrar for the convention, which
Right. Right.
yeah, I know you stepped down, and last I knew they were looking for a replacement, but well, I know that when I chaired in 2018, you did a very good job. So I want to say thank you for your service, sir.
That was, I think, my first year, and and I felt and I was struggling and sort of barely making it work with duct tape. But I got a little better in the next 2 years, a little more organized.
And
But it's immensely fun to be the registrar, I have to say. Anybody who is thinking about doing it, I really do recommend it because when you do the table, and you're checking people in and registering, you meet literally everybody. You have to meet literally everybody, and it's such a fun thing. If you're an introvert, it's not as easy to do when you don't have a reason to. But when you are being the registrar, you have a great reason, and you do meet everybody, and it's wonderful.
all right, yeah, it's a really good point. That yeah, people like I'm actually thinking introverts, people who just don't like to talk much, but it's more like, well, if I don't have a reason to say something, I'm not going to. So
That's right. That's right. And it's harder when you're an introvert to just, start talking to somebody, unless there's like a particular reason why you should. But as the registrar, you automatically do, and it gives you a role to play, which is great.
right.
So I do recommend it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Um, do you have any thoughts on other versions of Oz that have popped up in like pop culture over the years? Like, you know, I know how Disney basically wishes they had Oz all to themselves with they did Return to Oz and then Oz the Great and Powerful, or have you not really bothered with those?
Right. So in both of those movies, um, there were there were things that I liked about them, but I wouldn't say I loved them overall. Um, Return to Oz has a lot of wonderful stuff in it, uh, but there were just a few things that don't quite work for me,
Hmm.
like the electric shock, um, uh, and I guess I have a different view of the Gnome King. But it's still a fun movie. I have it in my collection, and I certainly enjoy watching it. Oz the Great and Powerful, much less so. All the sexual shenanigans are a huge turnoff. James Franco's uh, portrayal of the Oz is just so unlikable and uh, kind of such a jerk that it makes me not want to go on the journey with him.
Yeah, that is a point where you read Bombzar's books and it's like there definitely are references to romances happening, but it's not. Baum never puts it directly at the forefront of the story, where he never does a full, flat out love story as the main plot.
Right. I think Oz, one of the things that I love about Oz is that it is not about romance, it's about friendship. All these different friendships, fellowship among, all the main characters, sort of in general, and also friendships within that. Dorothy and Ozma, Scarecrow and Tin Man, uh, that kind of thing. The Button Bright Ojo friendship is there. But it's not as prominent, obviously. But you do see it in The Lost Princess of Oz and in Glinda of Oz. It's definitely a thing, and I just think that's wonderful uh, in Oz.
And then, so there's And there's also the fun little different ways you could read certain relationships, like the people like Scarecrow and Tin Man, Oz's premier gay couple.
Right. If you want to look at it that way, there are times when they sure do seem to have a thing going, but it's on an emotional level, and they prefer it that way.
So they're happy the way they are, and well, sometimes there's a patchwork girl involved or something.
Right. And some people, other authors can take it further if they want to.
Right. Okay, so now you've said that you've written your 4 books, and that's really as far as you plan to go with writing Oz stories, which I can respect that. It's nice to have a line where you can say, "Okay, this is it. I'm done." Wait,
Yeah, I felt with the last book, Immortal Longings of Oz, that I really had put a period on Button Bright and Ojo's adventures together. And clearly they would go on and have more, but I had done what I needed to do with them. And also, 4 books is enough for anybody, I feel. The world doesn't need any more uh, books from me, so I think it's good the way it is.
oh,
And I've run out of stories to tell. So.
well, for now, but we respect you, Paul. Okay, so, ooh, um, what else? Have you? Let's see. Have you now? You live in San Francisco, right? Where? Okay, didn't quite hear you there.
Yes, San Francisco.
All right, and have you work at the? What's your current job right now, or?
I have been working in the mailroom at San Francisco Opera for about 28 years, and then 10 years before that in the merchandising department at San Francisco Opera. Yeah, so I've been there since 1984.
All right. Has Oz ever crept into your professional life sometimes, or?
Well, it's in my office. There are on my door, my office door, there's a little sheet that has the covers of my 4 books on it. So that's always there. And then there's some photographs on my bulletin board. Um, yeah, so it is always there.
All right. Okay. Now, I'm gonna try to see if we can pull out a few more minutes of Oz questions here. I don't see anyone with any questions in chat at the moment. So, all right. All right. So, uh, now you've also been. I wouldn't say you're super active on Facebook, but that's at least you always use that to at least communicate with other fans and kind of keep up with each other between conventions.
Right.
Like I know that. Um, I guess you do have like a kind of like at least a friendly relationship with other Oz writers. Like I know Nathan Dehoff is who hasn't been published, has his own books published yet, but he's written quite a few stories of his own.
Who is this that we're talking about?
Nathan Dehoff.
Oh, yes, yes, of course. Um, yeah, we've been really lucky that Nathan has come to the last several OzCon conventions, and it is always great to see him there, and it's always great when his wife Beth comes along too.
Yeah. Okay. So, what Now,
another young writer that I just want to mention is Surin Oganessian, who won a couple of awards so far and is a very promising and fun writer.
yeah, I haven't met him in person yet, but
No, I don't think any of us because he hasn't been to any conventions yet.
right. Well, hopefully that changes in the near future.
Yeah.
So, alright. So, there's now we are going to be shifting to a different show here in a bit, but as a kind of like bridge there's the kind of Freddie who's in the gay community, friend of Dorothy. Now, both of us are, yeah, we're friends of Dorothy.
Right.
Does that phrase mean anything specifically to you?
Gosh, it's so I've been hearing it for a long time, and there seem to be multiple versions of how it came to be, but it I think there's multiple meanings for me. It can mean Judy Garland is a gay icon, an icon to gay men in the gay community anyway, and so her portrayal of Dorothy seems to tie in with that, and also just um, the the way in which Oz welcomes the marginalized. Um, Dorothy's friends cover a wide range in the books of all different kinds of people. So, Friends of Dorothy, I think, is an extremely welcoming and warm kind of term to use.
Right. We would have like I. It always just like it kind of boggles my mind that the character of Polychrome has never really popped out of Oz and just kind of become a spin-off of her own, because I'm like, there's so much you can do with that character.
In terms of the rainbow flag.
True, it's like she's straight up a rainbow princess. Who could you could definitely just run with this somehow.
Poor Polychrome in TikTok of Oz comes in for a little sexual harassment from the Gnome King, but she handles it very deftly.
Yeah, she is iconic.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
And yes, the rainbows are above her.
Alright, so who are your favorite Oz characters, would you say, aside from, I mean, you can say Button Bright and Ojo and talk about them if you'd like, but
Hmm. Well, certainly them. I I tend to, I think, love the series um, rather than focusing on particular characters. Like our friend Erica Oliveira obviously has a thing for the Tin Woodman,
oh yeah.
and we love that about her. But I don't really think I have a thing about any particular character. I, I just love um, the whole thing. I love traveling around in Oz with whoever is traveling there, and doing whatever they're doing with them. So that's a tough one. Do you have favorites yourself?
Button Bright's always been one of my favorites, and I also have well, I mean, are you familiar with my book Outsiders from Oz? Where,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
it's on my shelf.
so yeah, I mean, there's reasons
My book
why.
it is too, which I recommend to everyone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Button Bright and the Wizard are definitely two of my favorites. So that's why they wound up featuring with a little plot line of their own there.
Hmm.
So, which there's no shit.
So
Yeah,
what appeals to you about the wizard? Interestingly.
yeah. It's like there's definitely some things they have to do because the continuity on the Wizard and Bombs books is a little iffy. But he eventually settles into being this character who, you know, I just like to try to picture, okay, what is a version of what Bond wrote that makes sense continuity wise? And then how do we make that work? So I figure he gets thrown into this strange world where he's probably in over his head.
Something.
Do you? The whole thing with him taking the throne and Ozma disappearing is kind of a little. You kind of have to figure that there's some decisions that had to be made that weren't maybe the best ones, but I like to. My personal headcanon is that he assumed sending Ozma away from the Emerald City would actually be keeping her safe. Keeping her safe.
Mm-hmm.
But
right. Although giving her to a wicked witch is probably not the safest thing to do. It's interesting, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but when I was a little kid, I really did not question the ethics of that situation so much. It was only when I got older that I really started thinking that kind of thing. But when I was a kid, I accepted things like that really without question, and I think that's what Baum expected his audience to do, to just sort of take it and go with the flow.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair reading of it, because goodness gracious.
Right.
So yeah.
But as we get older and keep reading them, of course our adult perceptions come in, and then suddenly the questions arise, and you have to deal with it somehow.
Yeah. Because you could say, well, maybe Mombi made him. Maybe he didn't realize that Mombi was a threat, or he heard that she'd been defeated, or did he know that that spoiler for the second book, that Ozma got turned into Tip.
Mm-hmm.
So there's little questions there, but I just like to.
Well, he may have had a. Mombi could also have given him a very false impression of herself.
Yeah.
She might very well have sold him a bill of goods, being a con artist every bit as much as he is. So he may have thought he was, or been able to convince himself that he was doing something reasonable.
Yeah. That's really kind of how I have to come down at, where he thought he was doing the right thing, and maybe he wasn't, but at the end of the day, things worked out.
And Ozma seems to forgive him, so
yeah.
Oh well, if she's okay with it.
Yeah. So Ozma allows him to live in Oz, and even allows him to actually become an actual wizard. So.
Right. Yeah. He's one of the 3 people who legally practice magic in Oz. So that's as great a mark of trust as anybody could get.
Yeah. All right. So that's why I like the wizard, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's also wonderful the way he the sort of not exactly fatherly role, but sort of like uncle-y role that he plays with everyone in Oz. He's not exactly a mentor, but he's ready to step in and help people with whatever they're doing, figure out ways to solve problems, and in a very good-humored and companionable way. So I think those are great qualities as he develops.
Yeah. Okay. Alright, we've been going for almost over half an hour now, so are we ready to switch podcasts, as it were?
Sure.
Alright. So, if you want to hear more with Paul, we're going to be switching over to recording the first episode of my new podcast, Let's Get Both Ties. What does that mean? Just read the abbreviation. Okay, so Paul would like to So, Paul, welcome to the first episode of Let's Get Both Ties. So if anyone just happened to pop in hear her first, would you like to introduce yourself?
So for me. So you're asking me to introduce myself, right?
Yes.
Okay. Jay has kindly agreed to interview me. I'm Paul Dana, member of the International Wizard of Oz Club, OzFan, and OzCon goer and author of Oz books.
Right. I wanted to get Paul because, well, good crossover here between the Royal Podcast of Oz and this new podcast. I mean, not that I was exactly starved for lack of choice, but I hadn't really had a nice sit down with Paul, and it's been after COVID. It's been a little while since I have talked to you. So
we have missed you very much at the last OzCon.
Yeah, if anyone doesn't quite know what happened there, I recently moved, so my finances were tied up, and I was like, I can't make it this time, guys. So.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock that you weren't coming. So this is the first one that I've been to that you were not present at.
Hopefully that changes, but there's
fingers
a few.
Crossed.
Yeah. So, Let's Get Both Ties is supposed to be an LGBT positive her podcast where we talk about, basically the history of the gay community, what we hope happens, some of the issues that we're still facing, because we're of course recording this in late September 2022, where there's been a few things where our community has been like, some of these things that we thought we had in the bag are not quite as in the bag as we thought, with the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade and comments from Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas letting us know that he'd like to put the decision of marriage equality back on the books.
Right.
But before we get into all that that stuff that makes us want to scream a little bit, how it's like for a lot of us, we grew up in worlds where we saw heterosexual relationships as what you would eventually just do, whether you were watching a Disney movie or her reading a story. And so for some of us, it could be a little difficult to figure out, hey, this is not actually where my life is going to be going. So how did you get to that point for yourself, Paul?
So I would say that the hardest thing for me was figuring out what the difference was between friendship and romance, because when I was a little kid and right up through high school really, I felt more at ease with women or girls, I guess I could say, at that age, than I did with boys, and it had to do with interests. It had to do entirely with interests and ways of approaching and talking about life. The boys had all started playing baseball and football, and I didn't feel that I had anything in common with them. I was still reading fantasy and wanting to watch fantasy movies. Um, so the people that I liked talking to the best were girls. Well, what did that have to do with liking boys in a sexual way? It was just confusing to me. So it took me a while to figure out what the difference was, and that sexuality was separate from that, was different. That it could include friendship, but also this extra dimension of sexuality, and so it was less a matter of social judgment or religious proscription or anything of that kind, and more a matter of uh, just what is all this? How am I approaching all this? But I didn't have religion in my family, so that really didn't enter into it.
Yeah, that can also put a little stall in there. Like, that was part of my story that took a little while to get settled out for me personally. I won't say that it's completely out of my life because of relationships I still have with my family, but hey. So,
Yeah, I was lucky. I was lucky that my family is a fairly liberal family anyway. I mean, my dad was a registered Republican, but I never had any kind of problem with him in terms of my sexuality. Um, he didn't entirely understand a lot about it, and in fact, a lot of straight people don't, and maybe even I don't. But um, but there was never any sense of judgment or exclusion or anything like that in my family.
that's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
It is.
I'm happy I got to have that, Paul.
Yes. Yeah, not everybody is that lucky. So right.
Um, so, about what age do you think you realized? Oh, I'm gay.
Well, I knew I liked boys for really as long as I can remember having any sense of it at all. Um, but it was really only when I was uh, in my early 20s that I was absolutely sure that I didn't also have sexual feelings about women and what that meant. It just took that long for me to figure it out. I feel kind of dumb now. So when I could actually say to myself, I'm not bisexual, I'm really full on gay, that was in my early 20s.
Right. That happens sometimes where, like, they say that your brain doesn't finish developing until you're 25, which, people pointed out by the time you do that, you can vote, you can drink, you can buy a house. So, well, as we have the money to anyway, but
Yeah, the people who have money can do that.
yeah, but by the time, long before you're 25, and supposedly your brain is finished maturing, that there's already so many decisions you're expected to have made that people are like, wait a minute, is this really fair?
Right, and the thing is, everybody does develop at a different pace, and everybody develops in different directions. So there are as many ways of being gay or of being LGBTQ uh, plus as there are people who identify as that.
Yeah. And I like to call it LGBT plus because sometimes there's people who are like, I'm not really sure I fit quite any of those, and it's okay to not be quite sure about it, as long as you can as long as you know that that you can be accepted, and If you need to just take a little longer figuring stuff out, that's okay.
Or if it's fluid, if it's something that moves around a bit, or that you feel like I know what I am and it's not quite any of those things, but I still feel comfortable in that box. There's room. There's room for all of that, and it's a very Aussie thing in that way.
Yeah. Um, when I pitched doing this podcast to you, I mentioned that um, you've been around for some of the big highlights of gay rights and the gay community in the past. For the last.
Well, I'm 65. I'm 65, so that includes the whole history of the gay rights. Most of the history of the gay rights movement happened while I was alive, at least from Stonewall on. There were some things earlier on.
Yeah.
But yeah, but when I was growing up, I was growing up in a suburb of Southern California. It was very quiet, and that kind of thing. I wasn't really. Well, what was on the news at that time was much more anti-war. It was hippies. It was drugs. Riots. There was much bigger news than Stonewall, and that didn't penetrate my consciousness at all. Literally, I was in shock when that happened, so I didn't even hear about it. But it was, and when I was in like maybe a freshman and sophomore in high school, that I began to hear about an actual gay rights movement, which was inspiring, but there was nothing like that happening in my neighborhood,
Right.
so I couldn't become part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little historical sidebar. Is that while a lot of people like to point to Stonewall, is that there were attempts to try to normalize and it just feels so crazy that we were there with basically Hillary openly being gay was actually criminalized, and the thing is that we kind of got to face that was a thing, and there are people who would like to make that way again. So
Well, I think there are states where certain specific acts are still criminalized,
yeah,
although they don't,
they're not enforced, but
it doesn't get enforced, but the laws are still on the books in those states.
yeah. So yeah, I was just saying that before Stonewall, there were groups like the Madison Societies and the Daughters of Bilitis who
Right.
were trying to who were trying to push for gay rights. It was just that Stonewall was a riot.
Right, and which was a whole different kind of activism, I guess. The previous groups were doing it in a more quiet, trying to be normal way, and Stonewall is much more in your face. It involved drag queens, and there was a lot of anger, and that was a huge change.
So, yeah, it's really been the reason why I just like to point out the reason why we've made such leaps and bounds over what is seriously a short period of time in human history, even as far as we've recorded it, is really because we've had people who are like, hey, we're not going to take this. I don't like, even marriage equality was, people were like, oh, we need to do this slowly, and they're like, no, we got people who are having to pay mountains of tax debt because they couldn't be legally recognized as a spouse.
Right. Right. And as you pointed out before, it is not necessarily a done deal. It's something we have to keep trying to fight for, and it could be taken away. So this struggle is emphatically ongoing.
Yeah. So yeah, like right now it hasn't taken off the books, but and we of course hope it doesn't get there. But we're like we kind of have to, we have to be out there. And this is really kind of the reasons why I wanted to start this, because we need to be telling our stories, putting that out there, so people can't say, oh well, I don't know what's going on with them. Our stories are out here. You can listen to them.
Right.
So
So congratulations and kudos to you for getting this project going
yeah,
and keeping it going.
yeah, and thank you
Yay.
for being the first one to pop on. So
I am proud and grateful to be here.
so um, I know that after Stonewall we had. There was the Stonewall was 1969, then we had the 70s, and kind of like late 70s to into the 80s and then 90s, we had the AIDS crisis, which I'm pretty sure that must have been a pretty scary time for basically anyone who was gay there. If you were,
Yes. Yes. So much worse for a lot of people than it was for me personally. I, you know, I was quite backward, really, in a lot of ways. I didn't want to hang out in bars, and I really wasn't that motivated to get out and start dating. So until I moved to San Francisco, which was when I was 27. Um, and then by then it was a full blown crisis, and everyone knew what safe sex meant, and um, so I was very conscious of all of that. But around me there were plenty of people who had been, very active in the community and active in the bars and all for years, and it was very very tragic time. Yeah.
yeah, and like we're at a point where they do have, and it feels. I wouldn't say that it. I mean, it's still basically an ongoing thing. The thing is, now we have medications for people who that can at least help them live a reasonably healthy life if they take care of themselves and everything. And
Right. And also inoculations that help. So yeah, it is still something that has to be watched, and we're still looking for a cure, if there is such a thing. But yeah, the situation is a whole lot better, and then the community is focusing on other things more than it is more than it more than it is on AIDS.
yeah, it says that kind of like came up when COVID started, and I remember someone was like, "Oh well, if they're going to cancel this, are they going to cancel Pride parades?" Yes, we did.
I was one of the fun things about being in San Francisco is that we do have a big Pride parade, and the company that I work for, San Francisco Opera, has a contingent in it. So I've been able to march with the San Francisco contingent the last several years, which is great.
Yeah. San Francisco definitely has a very special place in the gay culture in America. With um, I I don't think I really looked at it myself, but I remember hearing that it was like it would be basically be a pretty common port if you were like, well, it was
Well,
basically what would
it's a
like
place that a lot of people from other places came to spread their wings and find acceptance and just be out and enjoy being out in the gay district and everywhere else. Uh, and I think that continues to some degree. Um, so yeah, that's a wonderful thing about it.
Mhm. Um,
And it helped me spread my wings too. I had lived in Santa Monica for 6 years before I came to San Francisco, and goodness knows the gay culture in Los Angeles, but I really didn't get close to it. It was in San Francisco that and really through the opera, that I began to feel more at home and comfortable.
okay. Now you've. I remember that. Was at one point you noticed that I mentioned I was writing short stories on commission, and well, you mentioned that you'd also done some very interesting short stories over the years.
Okay, so now you are talking about Slash, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's not exactly considered the most highbrow of art, but I think it's a legitimate way that people can express their sexuality or how they feel about things.
Right.
And frankly, it's basically like some of the things you might read about in Slash. Frankly, I'd rather you write about it than actually do it if depending on what type
Well,
of thing you're writing.
so maybe depending, we don't, who all might be listening to this now or in the future, so maybe we ought to define what Slash is. Slash is fan fiction in which characters who are not explicitly are are put into gay situations, often very pornographic, not necessarily, but often, and um, and uh, and it's huge. There are like thousands and thousands of people doing it, and a lot of women are writing Slash about male characters.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair description?
Yeah. I mean, would you like to talk about? I mean, I'm not asking you to exactly describe it, but would you like to talk about how slash writing here? I'm trying to phrase it
So
as
what?
nicely.
Right. Uh, just what it was for me.
Yeah.
So 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 my Slash writing generally was in the Lord of the Rings canon, at the time when the movies were coming out, and I don't know, I found there was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper, um, a small article saying that it existed, which I didn't know. I didn't know that it existed, and there was an article that talked about it. I said, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like fun." It sounds a bit silly and crazy, but it's like fun. So I poked around online and found um, a site that did that, and that first story, and it was fun. I had a great time doing it. It was and other stories followed, and I met people who were also doing who are still doing wonderful people. So and just that be a fun thing to do at that time, a way to socialize, a way to get certain things off my chest, a way to explore fantasies. It was just great. Great. I had a great time doing it.
Okay. So, hi. I mean, you said the word already, so let's kind of ask, what was your major pairing there?
Oh, I didn't have just one. So no, it rounded it. So but there was sort of a story. There was sort of a storyline. Uh, but oh gosh, a bunch of people. So almost all the characters that you would imagine. Um, Frodo and Sam and Faramir and Merry, uh, Gandalf, and there was a funny one called Gandalf and Tom Bombadil that was just completely silly and had a lot of goofy rhyming. Um, yeah.
Okay, that last word, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to see if I can find that one.
I'm not telling anybody where to look for any of these.
Okay.
But there is plenty of Slash out there for anybody who wants to look for it. Oh my gosh, it is just overwhelming how much there is.
Okay. So yeah. Alright. Now, I mentioned when I pitched this to you that I wanted to talk about your hopes for the community going forward. Like as we mentioned, that yeah, our we can't rest on our laurels because those laurels are not even assured.
Right.
So
Um, so you're thinking about the future. Um, I it's this is a very tough question because the future of the planet and of the species are equally up for grabs, I would say, at this point. And the younger generations are very conscious of this, as far as I can tell. Um, from the millennials on, it's just, where do we go ecologically? Where do we go politically? Where do we go as gay people? All of these things are under threat. And what do we attend to first? And what is, and I kind of, there's a part to say my generation failed. Why would anyone even care what I think? Uh, the younger people really need to take this ball and run with it, um, because I don't know how much we have to say to them that is relevant to them.
well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak dimly because I feel like a lot of things that happened were short sighted because people were it was like way back if you look at the whole thing with uranium, people are like, oh, we can use this and put it in things that'll make you feel better, and it turns out no, it actually gives you cancer.
Right.
So it feels like it's kind of like that same mentality has gone through. Oh, well, we can make the things out of plastic and it's easily disposable, and it turns out no, this is getting into your water and that's
Right.
not good
Well,
for.
and a lot of it comes down to economics too. Not just can you use it, but can you make money off it?
Yeah.
And if someone can make money off it, they will say whatever they need to say to make it seem okay and to get sales and make that money.
Mhm.
And we are still in that place. There is definitely no lack of um, corporate will to keep making money. Um, so that's something we still um, are struggling against, and that uh, influences politics more than we wish it would.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the struggle today is exactly the same as it has been, as it was throughout the 20th century. That uh, we it's an uphill battle to get any change done in the face of corporate interests and their power in government.
Oh yeah. So it.
Constant fight.
Yeah. So it's like there's not going to be much gay life if we don't have life. So it's like
Right.
everything is like super important for us to think about.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So it's like the thing that gives us hope going forward is that we are recognizing these issues. We are talking about them. We're not just brushing them under the rug and be like, oh well, let's keep going. Despite a contingent who does seem to want to do that.
Right. Um, so at the moment, we have a president who does like to keep those issues front and center. And but even so, the political realities keep him from uh, doing as much as we wish he could do.
Yeah, and even then you look at the you can take a look at the map of the world and you look at the United States and you realize it's actually compared to the rest of the world, it's a pretty small country. So
Right.
while definitely what the United States does is it can definitely inspire other countries and try to be a model or a leader going forward. It's just one country here among all these others, so it's not just our country. It's all the countries that need to do some work on this.
Right. It's very analogous, really, to a member of Congress. One member of Congress with great ideas cannot necessarily accomplish much unless they get others on board to help them achieve what they want to achieve. And it's the same in the international community.
Yeah,
But there is, I think, the fight is happening. It is ongoing, and there are great people doing great work. It's just in some ways not going as fast as we would like.
yeah, and sometimes it feels
There's
like
there's danger, and there's danger of backlash.
yeah. So, but like we said, like I said, we want to be. I kind of want to be positive here. So even if we do talk about heavy subjects, we still want to kind of go out on something hopeful, because, like I said, the thing is, we are talking about these things. We want things
Yes,
to get
and in
better.
terms of the gay community, I don't see it going back into the closet, no matter no matter what happens. If
Oh
they take
yeah,
gay marriage away, I do not see us going quietly back into the closet and pretending we don't exist anymore. I think the political, the level of political organization and activism that exists in the community is is a lot more powerful for them.
man. Thank you, Paul. That was really good because yeah, we. The thing is, they can do what they want. The fact is, we're still going to be here.
And I just wanted to say that OzCon and the Oz community generally reflect um, the the status quo in Oz to such a great degree, the degree of welcomingness, the degree of openness to all kinds of people and ways of being. And I think that's one of the things that I love about the Oz community, as well as the Oz books. And I hope you agree that it's a place where a lot of people who might feel marginalized elsewhere feel welcome and included and uh, able to lead and participate and all of those things. And we are lucky to have it.
I I agree. Okay, so Paul, I want to thank you again for having this call with us. It's we had some learning curves here in the start because we got started a little late, but
Thank you for sticking with it.
yeah. So thanks for making time to talk here, and it's always good talking to you, man. Yeah.
Wonderful to hear your voice.
So yeah, I definitely some of my yeah. What was it? It was definitely 2019. Some of my best memories were just talking with you at a Silmar. So, I mean, not a Silmar, Kellogg. Oh my goodness,
Right.
it's been
That's
a day
okay.
already. So,
Well, lots of great people at the Oz conventions. We are so lucky to have them.
alright. Well, thank you, and guess I'm really gonna go ahead and wrap the call here. So, um, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Paul. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. So for the one viewer who's still here, thanks for tuning in and checking through. I'm gonna go ahead and get this closed down for now. All right. So have a thanks for stopping by, and I'm going to be editing this as audio and putting it on podcast feeds or podcast of Oz, and let's get both ties. So there we go. Alright. There we go. Alright, thanks for coming by, and you have a good one.